And what happened in Hawaii could qualify as that, of course. So the false emergency alert about a ballistic missile threat to Hawaii induced real fear and panic throughout the islands. And while the threat was false, the panic and the fear were real. I understand that there were human factors and system failures involved. And I'd like to ask you some questions about what we can learn from this about the system's failures and how we can improve the emergency alert systems, not just for Hawaii, but for every state. So can you explain to me exactly what the role of your department is in overseeing state emergency alert systems?
Yes, ma'am. So we provide the backbone of an alerting system which state and locals are able to tap into to reach their citizens. It's called the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System. It provides for a variety of capabilities, including geotargeting, so that we can alert those who are in harm's way. But the decision in this case to utilize that backbone and how it was utilized was the state's decision.
Yes, we realize that it all started with human error. So obviously, we need to identify the human failures and correct them. And then to the extent there were system failures, because there was a very long span of time from the first alert and then correcting that alert. So that seems to point to some communication and other kinds of failures that we ought to be addressing. So do you have the responsibility to convene state emergency managers to make sure that each state has an alert system that functions properly?
We do request a variety of information from state and locals on their alert and warning systems as part of our threat assessments conducted by FEMA, as well as anytime we provide grant assistance. Often the request is to use federal money to improve alert and warning systems, in which case, of course, we work with the states to ensure that that's done in a way that makes sense.
So do you have an overall responsibility, or a part of your responsibility is to make sure that every state's alert systems work properly?
What we do, yes and no. So in other words, we provide the backbone to ensure that at any time, if the president or the Department of Homeland Security would need to send an alert to citizens with an impending catastrophic event, for example, we can do that. The state and localities then often use that backbone to distribute and disseminate their own messages. I will say in some areas, as you know, state and locals have their own systems that you can opt into with other types of non-catastrophic events, snow, for example, or major rainstorm, something else that their citizens should be aware of.
Well, this had the potential for being totally catastrophic. So do you have a role in setting standards and ensuring that state emergency management agencies use best practices in a situation like what occurred in Hawaii on Saturday?
So FEMA has been in touch with the emergency manager in Hawaii. We have offered our support for any after action that they perform. I have asked my folks at DHS to do their own after action to ensure that we are clear when we receive a alert and warning from a state, both that it is disseminated properly, but also that we can verify. Initial lessons learned, we would work with the states, particularly in this threat, to ensure that they're connected to those who can quickly verify whether that threat is real or not. In that case, that would be the Department of Defense. So we are in active conversations with them to ensure that they can improve their system. Yes, ma'am.
So you would agree that that there are responsibilities that FCC, for example, they have acknowledged they have a certain responsibility, DHS, the state, and the Pacific Command, because the order to send out this alert should have come from Pacific Command upon getting the notification from Northern Command that there was a missile launch and where it was heading. So we can improve all of those communications.
Yes.
Was your department aware that the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency did not have a mechanism currently in place to address a false alarm situation and an alert retraction mechanism?
We were not aware before this occurrence, no, ma'am.
Are you going to make sure that every state has that kind of fail-safe mechanism?
We will work with states to ensure that, yes.
So the White House called the false alert purely a state exercise, but I think that understates the problem, because I believe that addressing issues with alerts about a ballistic missile threat from a foreign country, everyone assumed that it was from North Korea, is not only a state problem. Would you commit to working with me to ensure that states, not just Hawaii, we have to include Guam, are already in a uniform and effective way to alert their people of missile threats?
Yes, I will, and I'd also like to work with you to ensure that we're providing specific instructions on what to do upon an alert.
And once Hawaii EMA, the Emergency Management Agency, realized that it had sent out a false alert, it apparently wasn't clear to them whether or not they needed to consult with FEMA before sending out a retraction. Do you know what the requirements are? Were they supposed to get FEMA's somehow agreement, involvement in order to send out a false alarm message?
And no, ma'am, there's no requirement for them to get any permission from FEMA to retract a mistaken alert and warning.
So the fact that seemed to have been a concern, that's yet another clarification of clear communication that has to occur.
Yes, we all should clarify that.
So how can DHS play a role in ensuring that all of the systems involved in sending out alerts and retracting them are understood by all the states? Are you taking some very specific steps to make sure that this is happening?
Yes, I have asked the administrator of FEMA to work with the state emergency management agencies to ensure that the protocols and standard operating procedures are clear, both on issuing initial alerts, understanding the basis on which they have been alerted, and then, of course, making a course correction in the very, very small cases when that might be necessary.
Are there formal plans in place on how to respond to a domestic missile attack? Because we're not just talking about Hawaii, of course, or Guam, but North Korea is developing missiles that can reach continental U.S. So is there a formal plan in place through your department on how states are to respond to a domestic missile attack?
We continue to work with the states to understand the threat and the effects of it. In the federal interagency, we've had a variety of exercises leading up to a cabinet-level exercise in February, where we will discuss the federal rules and responsibilities in support of state and local response.
I understand that when you say that the cabinet level, it was the sub-cabinet level, not at your level.
Nope, I'm sorry. I said the cabinet level will occur in February. We did have a deputy secretary exercise in the fall. Yes, ma'am.
So you are going to have a cabinet level exercise
We are,
to make
absolutely.
sure that every state has in place what they need to.
Well, let me just be clear. The cabinet level exercise will clarify the roles and responsibilities of the federal government. So that includes, as you say, DOD. To the extent that we're talking about an alert and warning system, we'd like to make sure that the FCC, which is undertaking an assessment, as you know, is clear. So we'll clarify that. At the same time, we're working with state and locals to make sure that they have the information that they need.
Thank you. It sounds as though everybody's on board, especially after what happened in Hawaii, to make sure that this doesn't happen in Hawaii or any place else for that matter.